goes together. If you look at the whole big picture, it's about the Democrats and people telling you that you haven't suffered. You haven't suffered. You don't know suffering. So you need to give more away. Well, there's a story I just told you about a woman who's white that suffered probably more than any minority you have ever heard of any story. Of any story. That's the topper. I think that's the topper. And there's this idea that minorities suffer far more than white people can possibly suffer. White people, let's say, there are numerous countries of very white people. None of them I have come from. None of them my ancestors come from. Possibly a little Scottish. Possibly. But when we think of white countries, we think of Sweden, we think of Germany, we think of Poland, we think of England, we think of Ireland. Even though Irish people have been enslaved, by the way, for many, many years. The English people sold the Irish people into slavery. But then things changed, and then they started discriminating against other nationalities that were darker skinned, or they deemed pagan, even though they were Catholic like they were. It's interesting how bigotry changes and prejudice and racism change. You know, you suffered, you think that you would have some compassion. Well, anyway. So these countries, Germany, Poland, Switzerland, all these very, very, very white countries. And then as you get to the Mediterranean, you're going to get darker skinned people, right? And the lower you get, even darker. Well, here's a story, a quick little story. I'm not going to go into too many details because this story is horrific enough. And it should blight out of your mind when you meet, the next time you meet a white person and think that they have privilege or think that they have never suffered. You need to get that out of your head. That what you've been told, brainwashed to believe that it is only minorities that suffer, when, you know, whites, truthfully, when you look at the world, are actually minorities in the world. But we'll look at just America. And that minorities suffer a great deal in America, despite the fact that nearly 100% of immigrants, legal and illegal, that are coming into this country are not white and not Christian either. So as oppressive as you think America is, it's a wonderment that these people are either flooding the borders or filling it out the legal way and waiting years to get into this country. If it is bad, apparently it really isn't as bad. Apparently that's a fairy tale because these people are coming in droves, and it's about 3.5 million that overstay their visas. So it's about 3.5 million a year people who are not white nor Christian that flood the borders, either legally or illegally, to get into this country. So I'll tell you the story about Fraulein Frizl. I know, Fraulein Frizl. That's her name, okay? Well, it was said when she disappeared that she had enough of her family, and she just took off and ran away from home in 1984. But that isn't what happened. Apparently the mother died, and the father called her into the basement where she would spend the next 24 years of her life. She didn't do anything wrong. It's like there's some kind of punishment. But you know, there is no law that says if a daughter does something wrong, you must call her into the basement and keep her there for 24 years. You don't do that. If she's really legally broken the law, possibly have the law come in, and then they decide if it's really against the law, whatever she did. But as it turns out, she didn't do anything wrong. She was just born a woman, and she was young. And I'm going to assume very attractive. So her father called her into the basement, where he kept her for 24 years. And he raped her. Violent, brutal sexual assault. Every day in a dark basement with no light. Wonder that she survived for 24 years. And in that time, because she was young and fertile, she gave birth to 7 children, at least one of whom died, because they found the rotting carcass in the basement. Yes, she gave birth to twins. One of them died, and the father made her live with the rotting carcass of her dead child. And the father made his grandchildren, which were his children, they were actually his children since he was the father, live every day with the rotting carcass of their sibling. That's about the most horrible thing I can ever think of. You say that minorities suffer more in this country, where they didn't get paid enough. And it doesn't matter whether you're a minority or you're not a minority or whatever you are, and whatever the problems that you've faced in this world. I've heard many horrible stories, and I could tell you personally many horrible stories. But I think this one is a doozy. And for all we know, because recently we heard about that family who kept all their children, even though they were grown up. They were chained to their beds and they were malnourished. They weren't fed. They kept them like prisoners. Some reason, I think psychologically, some parents actually think that because they gave birth to them, they own them like a possession and they can control them. Just like in an abusive relationship between two partners, where a partner, one of the partners is abused, well, they're treated like an object. They're not human. They have no feelings. Or the person that's abusing them makes them believe they're not worthy of feelings. They're not worthy of life. They're not worthy to be human. They are not worthy to have a future. They're not worthy to have happiness or to smile once. Now, this woman could never even see her reflection in a mirror. Can you imagine going 24 years and also never taking a bath, never being able to wash yourself for 24 years in a basement that's probably filled with mold and mildew and dirt? And that's the place where you keep things in a basement, things that you don't want. Rotting rats, things like that. God only knows what she ate. I doubt he cooked her some really nice food and brought it down. Well, you're getting kept in a basement, but you get gourmet dinners every night. Just because I rape you every day and you're living with the rotting carcass of your child, I'm at least going to give you nice food. No, he didn't do that. So finally, after 24 years, they discovered that she and her children were locked in the basement. And finally, he went to prison in his late 80s. He doesn't have that much longer to live. And he's not going to be suffering. No death penalty for him. he should have the death penalty. In fact, he should get tortured slowly every day. He should get the same hell as she did. Put him in the basement of the prison and let the prisoners take turns raping him. Oh, that sounds so evil and so wicked of you to say. Look what he did to his own daughter. At least these people will be strangers. At least these people are strangers, and they're not raping their own daughter. So it's, no matter what you do to this man, it's not as bad. And he's not going to be giving birth to any children that are going to die and rot in a basement. Can you imagine how these children are going to grow up? Can you imagine the psychological trauma that she's been through, that she's never going to heal from, and neither are those children ever going to heal from? So the next time you look at somebody white and think that they have privilege, maybe they're walking down the street with you, or maybe they're dressed really nice. You don't know what they suffer through every single day of their life. You don't know. As that saying goes by the Native Americans, let me not criticize my neighbor until I walked a mile in his moccasins. So let's stop criticizing and assuming somebody has privilege. I've worked my whole life on minimum wage. And I was a legal secretary. I've done extremely complicated jobs. And I learned them all from the ground up. But they still didn't pay me enough. So I have a gripe. And I certainly will never get in my retirement. No pension. I won't get anything. I'll be as impoverished as you can possibly believe, unless I can somehow make something out of what I'm doing now. Maybe something will come to me, and that's what I'm trying to do. But you can't judge people. I don't care if they're minority or not a minority. And you can't, the fault that I have made in my life is that when I hear a sad story, somebody gives me a sad story. Boyfriends have done this to me too. Anybody, girlfriends, it's amazing. I always think to myself that they've suffered more than I have. And I want to do for them and give to them and make up for the pain that they suffered. And that I didn't deserve the money that I had, the little money I was making. So I bought them things and physically helped them out with my time and my energy. And I gave it away, and I don't have a dime. And then when I look back at it, I think to myself, the stories that I've been told, thousands, boyfriends have taken thousands from me, because I have this compassion. And I keep thinking that they make me think that I've, either because I'm white, and they're white too, that there's no way I could ever really suffer. There's no suffering that I really had. I don't deserve what I have, or the little money that I've made. And so they've talked me out of it. And I look back and I go, you know, their stories really weren't that bad. That's really not suffering. And I look at my life and I say, that's horrific. That's horrific. So sometimes we, out of compassion, too much compassion, we give. And we give too much of ourselves. Because people, and of course the Democrats, wonderful, because we're brought back to politics now. The Democrats have made us believe that these groups of people have suffered more than we ever will. And so we have to constantly give to them. When we look at our own lives, and some of us have children that we can't give any more in our taxes. We can't give any more. And we can't be told that we're not suffering as much just because you're white and they're not white. So therefore they're suffering more. Or you're an American citizen. Once you're an American citizen, you're an American citizen. These people aren't. Therefore, they're suffering more. No, it doesn't work that way. There's a lot of American citizens who are on the streets. A lot of American citizens who have mental problems that they can't keep themselves fed and clothed and a roof over their heads. So they're on the streets and they end up dying from exposure and drugs or alcohol because they have to self-medicate. And then there's the Appalachians who are extremely poor. And they're completely forgotten about. It's always the people who live outside the border who need to come in, and we need to take care of them all. Yet we don't have enough money to take care of ourselves or our own children. So this is baloney. It's baloney that the Democrats have told you this. And the Democrats who are telling you this, and you look at their lifestyle, they all live in gated communities. They have more than one house. Why, Maxine Waters has about 4 houses that cost over $4 million. Obama has 5 houses that cost over $8 million all over the world in the most beautiful places in the world: Hawaii, California, in the nice side of Chicago, Washington, D.C., and Martha's Vineyard. And they're telling us that these other people are suffering and we have to keep giving more. And somehow Feinstein and Pelosi are billionaires. I mean, they make all this money working, and their families, their husbands get jobs, like they kick job because they're working for the government. They will give their family jobs that will make them wealthy, contract positions to work for the government, and then they get wealthy too. And they're telling us they must raise our taxes, or we must take away Trump's tax break because the government needs more money. By whom? Well, stop letting these people in the country. Take care of the people in this country who are suffering and poor. Why don't you go live on the street? Why don't you sell your house, take all that money, sell all your homes, take all that money, and pay for a bunch of people. In fact, you should really pay for a bunch of people who are Americans that are poor, or Americans that are on the street, or let some of the homeless into your home. Since you're telling us this, I would shut up if I were you. I would shut up because you have too much and you're hypocrites. And I'm ashamed that Pelosi's Italian. I'm ashamed. There are mafiosos that are better than she is. I have no mafioso in my family. I'm a different part of Italy. I'm not Sicilian. I'm the Greek side, the side that was Greeks settled in that part of Italy. Stop telling us this. And we, as American citizens, you need to go to those voting booths. You need to put up candidates that will get these people out of office because they're greedy. And all they do is trying to make us feel really bad that we have so much and they don't. Well, there's 400 million people south of the border, and there's almost 2 billion Muslims in the world. And if you want to bring them all in as refugees, honestly, where are you going to put them? How are you going to feed them? We don't have enough land, and we don't have enough sewer systems, and we don't have enough water, and there's always a drought. And remember global warming? That's why it's better that people are spread out over the world. And then we can take care of waste better too if people are spread out. So we have to stop listening to them. Stop feeling guilty. Like I felt so guilty, I gave everything away, and I keep giving away. We have to stop this because you might be suffering more than this other person is suffering. Why should you give everything away? Then you will have nothing. Jesus didn't mean give everything away and then starve your children. No, that isn't what he meant. Give everything away and then you become absolutely, totally poor. That story that he told the rich person who wanted to follow him, he knew he was a hypocrite. He just wanted to buy heaven. That's why he told him that story, that you must give everything away and come join. Come follow me. But he was a hypocrite. And that's why he said it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of the needle than for a rich man to enter heaven. It's because this rich man was a hypocrite. He was a hypocrite. And there's a thing in Jerusalem called the eye of the needle. And you come to it with your camel and all your belongings on the back of the camel. And for the camel to get through that hole, you have to get off the camel. And you have to take all the burden off the camel's back, which means all your material goods must be taken off the back of the camel. So the camel can bend down basically on his knees to get through the eye of the needle. You must be able to give everything up and humble yourself. It's a humbling act to be on your knees, to get through, to be able to say, I can give all this, basically give this away. But he's talking to a hypocrite, a wealthy hypocrite, like these Democrats are wealthy hypocrites telling you to give everything away. You must be more humble. You must give more. You have nothing, yet you must give more. Your taxes should be higher so we can take more of those taxes and we can give them to the people who we want, who are coming over the border and who we will pay for and we will allow to work under the table, and then they will vote for us because we basically paid for their vote. This is what they're doing, and this is what you have to stop listening to. And we need different people getting into office. But anyway, that's a quick story. It's a quick story, and I added a little thing on the side. But it all goes together. If you look at the whole big picture, it's about the Democrats and people telling you that you haven't suffered. You haven't suffered. You don't know suffering. So you need to give more away. Well, there's a story I just told you about a woman who's white that suffered probably more than any minority you have ever heard of any story. Of any story. That's the topper. I think that's the topper. So on to the next video. Goodbye.